My friends, how do you respond to rejection? A 10-year-old boy passes a note to a girl sitting next to him. The note says, circle yes or no to the question, do you like me? The girl circled no. A college student applies for a job and is turned down. We're looking for someone with more experience, the manager says. A 53-year-old person with plenty of experience applies for a job and is turned down. We're looking for someone younger, the manager says. Rejection. We've all faced it. Remember the anger or the embarrassment? Our gospel today tells us that Jesus knows how we feel because he has been there. Recorded just before this gospel, Jesus asked 3 people to follow him, but each of them had excuses. Can you imagine turning Jesus down? How it must have hurt him? The question is, how did Jesus respond to rejection? Well, our gospel today tells us. First, Jesus did not give up. Rather than give up on his mission, Jesus doubled his efforts to reach out to the world. He assigned 72 disciples to go before him as he journeyed to Jerusalem. Though Jesus was turned down by 3 people, he found 72 of them who said yes. I remember hearing a story about a young couple who lost their 12-year-old daughter. The couple were seated at the dining room table, and all they could do was stare at the empty chair where their daughter used to sit. They were overwhelmed by their loss. At one point, their silence was broken by the heavy sobs of their 8-year-old son. He said to them, "I'm still here. Remember me, I'm still here." At that moment, the parents' grief began to turn. While they lost much, they still had much. Now, instead of focusing on that empty chair, they spent their energy and time on the chair that was still filled. Secondly, Jesus prepared the disciples for success. Jesus knew that the disciples would encounter acceptance for the gospel, so he cautioned them to be content with people's hospitality. In other words, Jesus urged his disciples to seek contentment and not promotion. Happiness in life is not having what you want, but wanting what you have. So the mission of the disciples was to announce the good news of the kingdom. In other words, relish the victories of God, but remember whose victory it is. Finally, Jesus prepared the disciples for failure and rejection. You see, Jesus was not naive. He knew that not every announcement of the good news would be well received. He knew that the disciples would experience rejection. So he told the disciples to brush off the defeat in one house before they go to the next house. You know, too often we drag the accumulated dust of our own rejections and defeats into many other situations and relationships. We should not carry the wounds of rejection to the next opportunity to share the good news. But notice, even when the good news is not received, it is still good news. Jesus said, leave the town, wipe off the dust of rejection, and move on. The very good news that we announce when people receive it is the same good news that we announce when people reject it. So let's not carry the wounds of rejection that we experience in our daily life from one relationship to another. We need to move on, as Jesus said.